Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first one is titled, Neighbor built a fence in the middle of my driveway, blocking my garage. My car is trapped. So, I have a shared driveway with my neighbor. For those that might not know what this means, I'll help paint a picture in your mind. There is a thin driveway between the two houses that lead to our respective garages in the backyard. This means that if a car is parked in the driveway, nobody can get in or out. Seems simple enough, right? Well, not to my neighbor, who decided the driveway was his and did everything he could to not share it with me. I just have one vehicle, a pickup truck that is either in my garage or being driven by me. He has two cars and tends to want to leave one of them parked in the driveway. I asked him multiple times to please keep the other one at least in the back next to his garage so I can have room to come and go. Still, I would need to ask him constantly to move his car so I could go to work. Each time he did comply, but he was extremely angry about it. Then the situation got worse when he decided to start telling his guests to just park in the driveway. Sometimes there would be 2 or 3 cars lined up going all the way back towards the garages. I was getting fed up and reminded him again that his guests had to find street parking like everyone else and that he needed to leave the driveway clear. He told me that he would take care of it this weekend, and I thought that I finally got through to him. I slept in on Saturday, and when I came outside I saw that there was a fence in the middle of the driveway. I was furious and walked right up to his door and rang the bell. When he answered, I could barely keep a calm voice. Me. What is with the fence? Neighbor. Well, you seemed so concerned with the whole driveway situation and getting in my business that I decided to just build a fence along the property line. Keep in mind, the fence wasn't in the exact middle. In fact, it was so far onto my end that he could probably squeeze his cars in and out, while I didn't have a hope for it. Me car is in my garage though. I have no way to get it in and out anymore. Neighbor. Well, that's where the property line is. You should have found street parking like everyone else. I knew he was just mocking me and decided to give up on reasoning with him. I knew for a fact that the property line was actually right down the middle, and if he put a fence where it actually was, neither one of us would get back there. I gave him the easy chance to apologize, but now I was just going to get my revenge and make his life hell. I had work for the next 6 days and he didn't know I worked a decent drive away. So now I had to pay to take the train and was going to make sure that he paid for every penny of that trip. I called the city and had them send over a land surveyor to see that he built a fence in the driveway and that I was trapped in. While fences are allowed here, there is no way this one was put up legally. Not only could my neighbor not show him the permit for a fence to be in that location, but lectured him that it was dangerous to have a fence on top of a driveway. Right away I could tell that this guy was not listening to any of my neighbor's lies. He tried to tell the man that it wasn't a shared driveway. When that didn't work, he even tried to pretend that he owned both properties and I was just renting from him. The adjuster gave up pretty quickly on my neighbor and went to go measure the property line. It turns out that I was wrong about where the line was. In fact, 80% of the driveway was on my side of the property. I asked him about obtaining a fence for the backyard where it wouldn't affect the driveway, and he told me that it should be easy to get one of those. In the meantime, my neighbor was ordered to take down his fence immediately. I had the paperwork and went into my second stage to take him to civil court for the cost of the train ride. I wish that it would have been a more interesting or satisfying part to tell, but he didn't show up, so the court ruled in my favor. Now that I had my money back and the driveway accessible, I decided to get some revenge on the neighbor and show him that it was a bad idea to try and mess with me in the first place. I got my permit to build a fence and was having it installed in the backyard right near neighbor's garage. It didn't take long for him to run out and start yelling at me. Neighbor. What do you think you are doing? This is my garage. Me. I'm building a fence on my side of the property. I have a permit or everything. Neighbor. This is my half of the yard. I'll sue you for blocking me in. He was red in the face and screaming while I just had the biggest grin on my face as I had copies of paperwork in my hands. Me. Actually, I won't be directly blocking your driveway. The permit and land adjuster's assessment are right here if you want to see it. Up to where your garage starts is actually my property, and I can build a fence and gate in my backyard if I want to. I can tell that he probably wants to say more but is at a loss for words. I didn't mention it before, but when he had company he would like to use the whole of the backyard to throw parties. Now he has a fraction of that space to work with and I couldn't be happier. I even placed a sign where the fence starts stating that illegally parked cars will be towed. Nobody has tested me on this yet and I have been able to get my truck in and out every day with ease. My neighbor doesn't talk to me anymore, but I wouldn't consider that a downside. I saw his once with a different land adjuster trying to argue that my fence was illegal, and they said they couldn't do anything about it. Revenge truly is sweet. The next one is titled, Mind Your Own Business. Gramps had just moved into a retirement park with a lot that backed up to county land that was a nature preserve. His backyard was basically non-existent, but he didn't mind as he got to look out over the preserve. However, he did marvel at how his next-door neighbor's backyard extended a good 8 feet past his, giving neighbor a nice space back there. Gramps tried to be friendly with all his new neighbors, exchanging phone numbers and the like, and one day he noticed the next-door neighbor was putting down expensive pavers that extended from his back door all the way to the old fence posts that designated the preserve boundary. Gramps watched the neighbor yank the 3 rickety fence posts out of the ground and move them back an extra 2 feet into the preserve before pounding them back in, then started to clear the land, intending to gain himself more area for his pavers. Gramps used to work for the National Park Services as a young lad, so he thought he had better warn his neighbor of the consequences of his actions, so he heads out back for a little chat. Neighbor is immediately defensive and before Gramps says much, neighbor tells him, "You're new here, I've been here 10 years and to mind your own damn business." Gramps decides not to press the issue. Nothing happens that year, but the following year when most of the park emptied out to head north for the summer the county comes by to check on the preserve. Gramps notices them going back and forth behind his neighbor's house. The workers are pulling out maps and taking photos and making phone calls and soon more guys show up. Turns out neighbor has moved the posts several times over the years, and in reality his backyard is supposed to be even smaller than Gramps' backyard. To make it worse, neighbor put pavers in the back specifically to park both his golf cart and a cherry red sports car back there for the summer, so the county will have to move them before they can do anything else. They tape a notice to the front door and leave. Gramps goes over to read it, and it states that neighbor was in violation of encroaching onto protected lands. He has 30 days to move his car, tear up the pavers and pay a fine of $11,000 because of damage to endangered species who inhabit the protected lands, as well as trespassing fees. Failure to do so within 30 days will result in golf cart and car being towed and impounded. Pavers will be dug up and carted off at neighbor's expense and the fine will increase for every additional day past the deadline. 30 days comes and goes, so a week after that Gramps has quite the show as first the car and cart were towed, pavers were dug up and hauled off, and the old fence posts and ropes were replaced with metal posts embedded into buried cement bases, connected by steel cables. Whole process took several weeks to finish, but the preserve looked a lot more legit when they were done. A few solar cameras were installed so the county could monitor the wildlife and encroachers remotely. Meanwhile, more notices were taped to the front door of neighbor's house. By November the snowbirds were flooding back into the park, including neighbor. That was Gramps' second show of the summer as neighbor reads all the notices, digging down until he reads the first one, then runs out back and starts screaming and cussing up a storm before running back to his car to dig out his cell phone so he can call the county to find out where his car and golf cart were. Gramps stays indoors to avoid the guy as he is frantically trying to unload his car, turn on his water and electricity, get the AC and the toilets going, and all the while trying to get someone at county to pick up the phone and give him some answers. He finally gets a live person and proceeds to scream at them while on speakerphone about his car and cart, so the call keeps getting kicked to other people because who wants to help a screamer? Basically neighbor is told to come to the county office to get this straightened out. 3 days later neighbor catches Gramps outside and asks if he was here when the county stole his car and destroyed his backyard. Gramps said he was, and neighbor says, "Well, why didn't you call me when you saw them putting notices on my door? You had my number up north." Gramps said he had thought about doing that, but figured neighbor would prefer him to mind his own damn business, so he decided against it. The next one is titled, Needed in Writing. My new manager at work is one of those people that absolutely has to be in control. Even when you're exceeding every scorecard measure, keeping you head down, not putting a toe out of line, she still asks you to come to a meeting room to discuss some minor issue or another. Recently, she pulled me into a meeting to discuss me being late from work. Protocol is to call in, say we'll be late, then submit a schedule adjustment request when we arrive. She accused me of not calling in or submitting a request but was able to prove I did. Only instead of leaving it at that, she insisted I now needed to call her and explain why I was late. That's not the process, I told her, and she said she was making a new one. So now I call her at 6 a.m. on her day off to let her know if I'm gonna be late. She also had a meeting with me because my scorecard for a stat was 99,100. With a target of 50, she had to point out the 1100 I missed. She also did the same for a handling time issue where I am hitting an average of 600 seconds with a target of 1500. She needed to tell me about a call I took too long on. Suffice to say, complaints have been raised to her manager. Following an incident where she was asked to follow up on something for me, and claimed, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. I've been asking for everything in writing and repeat that mantra back to her when she claims to have told me something. Last week, she asked me to see her after my call. I walked over and she wasn't there, so went back to my desk. She asked me why I didn't stay around, and I reminded her of the time she put, in writing, that I wasn't to spend more than 1 minute waiting for her if she asked to see me and was to go back to my desk to take calls, not wasting time. She asked me to come over again, and when I did, she wasn't there. This repeated twice more before my shift was over. Each time I documented logged out at 14:14, 35 p.m., came to your desk, you were not there, spent 45 seconds waiting, returned to desk and took another call at 14:16, 38 p.m. in chat. She messages me to ask what time I finish. I tell her it was 2 minutes prior, and she says we can catch up now. I tell her that my shift if over, and ask if she'll approve an overtime pay for an out-of-hours meeting. She tells me not to be silly, and it'll just take 10 minutes. I refuse, and say if I don't get paid, we can do it tomorrow when I'm being paid. She's typing, then not, then typing, then not, choosing her words. I know she's angry at being challenged, and she decided to employ one of the tactics she used when she managed a team for a company where this was standard practice. Okay, well, if you'd like to go home now, I can always make it a formal meeting? A formal meeting, where I work is code for a meeting with HR, documented on your record, for misconduct and repeated issues. She thinks she's won. Not a problem. Make a formal meeting, ensure I have 24 hours notice, send a formal invite, and I will bring a support person with me. I log out and leave, but not before grabbing screenshots and saving a copy of the chat logs. Next day, she's called my bluff and has a meeting scheduled. I send it to my union rep, and she comes in on the day. HR sits down with us and opens with "So we're here today to discuss some concerns. Your team leader asked you to attend an off-the-cuff catch-up 3 times, and for some reason you refused?" I quickly clarify what actually happened. My manager claims otherwise, and I repeat her mantra if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Then I supply receipts her demands to put things in writing, her chat, my timestamps, my call logs, and her message to me afterwards. My union representative stares at the two of them, with a small smile, and asks, "So do you maintain the position that employees should attend meetings unpaid, and that misconduct investigations are a good use of resources if they refuse?" HR said there may have been a miscommunication, and that I could return to work. I have it put in writing that I am not accused of any misconduct, and have been cleared of any false accusations, with nothing documented on my staff file. Yesterday, my team was advised that our team leader had decided to pursue opportunities outside of the company and we were getting a new manager. The next one is titled, "Oh, you're close with the boss? I am too. Back around 2002, my dad and a friend of his started a company. They put it in the grueling and overwhelming amount of work necessary for it to have grown exponentially over the last 20 years. A couple years ago, they had an opening for a technical editor and my dad offered me the position. I would just like to say that I am so unbelievably grateful for this and I always will be, and I'm very mindful of the fact that I have to tread lightly sometimes. Every year during the holiday season they, like most businesses, throw a holiday party. They have several around the country so every office has one, but the main one is where corporate is headquartered. The first year I attended the party, nobody knew who I was. I tend not to share who I'm related to for obvious reasons unless somebody asks. It's not a secret by any means but it's not something I shout from the rooftops. Anyways, the bar opened an hour before the party technically started and, since it's an open bar, a few people were already quite a few drinks in. I went up to get a drink and somebody who I've never met introduced himself to me in a pretty rude and arrogant way. I'm talking you probably already know who I am, but if you don't, you should. I'm Holden, fake name. He was clearly pretty drunk, but it's a party and I didn't blame him. I shook his hand and tried to walk away, but he wouldn't stop talking about how important he was to the company. I smiled and nodded and oh and awed for quite a while, even as he spilled his drinks on me from gesturing wildly. Eventually he told me I'm also really close with the president. This interested me quite a bit because that was my dad and I had literally never heard this person's name. Not a problem though because I didn't know all his friends. But this dude kept going. Here's how that conversation went. H. Yeah, you could pretty much call us family friends. Me. Really? You know his family? H. Oh yeah, of course. We've all gotten together a few times, his kids love me. Me. Wow, that's pretty cool. I wasn't planning on saying anything because he was drunk and it didn't really matter to me. However, he then turns around and says okay, well I have more interesting people to talk to now. And walked away. I was livid. First of all, you spilt your crappy dirty martinis all over me so I smelled like olives. You were kind of a dick from the get-go. You waste 30 minutes bragging about yourself, and then you tell me I'm uninteresting? So I waited until the perfect moment when the party had started to taper off a bit. Our homebody Holden was still there, even more drunk than he was before. He eventually made his way over to my dad and mom, chatting them up and whatnot. I sidle over to the group and he gives me a stink eye, probably thinking I'm trying to cozy up to them too. The look of horror on his face when my dad hugs me and kisses me on the cheek and says, "Hey honey. Your brother is coming to pick us up, do you need a ride?" Was indescribable. It was a combination of I think I just crapped my pants and I'm going to yeet myself out this window immediately. It was genuinely one of the best small revenges of my life. In case anybody wonders, him and I laugh about the incident now and it's not a big deal. It's a funny story that I like to tell. I also would like to say that I hope I don't come across as entitled or bratty. Like I said, I'm so grateful for the opportunity I was handed and I work very hard to prove my worth.